Aleathia has been doing her art since she was about 3 years old. Three. And she's marrying her art. She's taking that journey, that path, those vows. Mm. Ready? Come on.
Yeah, go walk on the side.
It's irony and comedy, I say, because if you really have to look at the source of life, just when you think you're gonna make a plan, God's got something else in store for you. And I'm often saying I need to wear a shirt saying God got jokes, because you went from this pandemic and the horror of the shutdown to the, oh, I could do something with this. And I thought how divine it was, the timing, because I literally was looking through the glass door of the gallery when I took the last piece of art out and the lights were out, and started thinking, what next ahead?
A quiet war I have going on inside about the continuum of being present. This is always an ongoing challenge for me as a human on a planet that I never thought I'd fit.
Imagination is almost like it's taking the credit away from spiritual journeys. And for me, imagination is kind of like the dressed up way of telling people to be creative and use your third eye. There's been something going on lots longer and deeper than that word.
As a woman, I told that wasn't good enough, mediocre. What launched me to do my art as a business, because as a child I could make art between me and God, was a teacher in college telling me that I would never amount to much. So my worrying response was to start Aleathia's original artwork. And those pieces in the corridor around that corner were the images that I put on a line of clothing, and they were warriors.
Because in order to create, you have to surrender, you have to let go of something. So it's a spiritual surrender. And when you go on that journey, it's infinite. You don't get stuck. That's why when I find it odd for the first half of my life when people would ask, do you ever get stuck? I'm like, how do you get stuck on creating? This is infinite. If anything, what you'll get stuck on is your technical growth hasn't matched your mind and your creative spirit and all the visions that you're seeing. So you may have to learn the technical things to transport whatever's from here to here. So stuck? No. If you're in a surrender, it's always going to come to you, because there's things coming at you all day long, all the time. If anything, we desensitize ourselves to the things that we are connecting to or experiencing or feeling. We don't know why, but this is what's happening. Imagine if you just surrendered and embraced that.
For me, a vow is what you make and take between you and God, that nothing and no one, including you, can break.
when it happened and I had to shift, because I often think about, as an artist, you're always in solitude anyway to create, because that's the space you have to go in order to be able to hear and listen and surrender and then produce. So it's not an unfamiliar gate that I approached. If anything, it was like, at first I was wallowing in the, I want to do this, like when your parents give you a punishment, you can't go out and play. And then I had to learn how to embrace the mental part that this took, because that wasn't what people were planning and preparing for. And then I started shifting. And at first I went from the, I don't want to create, I don't want to make anything, because everything that I make is going to be indicative of the moment I'm in. Angry, hostile, violent, like all the energies of people, the news, everything that was being reported and recorded was negative, because you didn't know where else to go. You couldn't find it. And I then, to the point of how our conversation started, I then started going into meditation. Whenever I'm in crisis, I have to go that direction, because in that quiet place, I begin to hear on a different level. And I said, well, creativity isn't only when I paint a picture. That's the end result of all the other thoughts that go on in my manifestation, the spiritual messaging. And then, so was writing and taking nature walks to be able to breathe by some trees and taking photos. And I shifted what creative looked like, because I'm an artist no matter what. Because you can waste time instead of making and spending time. And so I had to realize that I was being gifted time so that I would actually start manifesting things. And just like in terms of a couple, you go to counseling, to marital counseling, to enrich and enhance your union. For me, when I took that class with Clark Hollingsford, I felt like there was a little disjointing in, how do I actually put this art forward into the eyes, hands, and hearts of people in a way that's productive? Because my commitment is to my art, the craft, the business, the spiritual, and all of these things. But I feel like I needed some counseling. So when I took that class, to me, spiritually, it was just like going and taking a counseling so I can be in a better marriage with my partner.
The undertaking, the determination, the promise she made, the journey, the vows she made day after day, the creation of her art, is the marriage of her labor through her sweat and her tears. And it all began 50 years ago when a 7-year-old Aleathia in the 2nd grade, during her days experiencing the sacred sacrament of First Holy Communion, not far from here, she was shined upon and lit up inside with the question, what is the difference between a vow and a promise?
May 9th was the anniversary of my 31st or 32nd year since I launched Alethia's original artwork. 1989, May 9th was when I launched my business professionally. So that day, I went online and painted for 12 hours, something like that. I started on Instagram and then migrated to Facebook. And then after I was off the air, I continued working, and that piece is still sitting by the window, half finished. But that was probably the first time I picked up a brush since we were at the gallery. And that was where I began to start looking at, what is creativity? What is using the gift that you were given? And for me, it just shifted on so many different levels. So I had to give myself permission. So taking photos in nature has been the most current thing I've been doing the most consistently. And I've always had a connection with nature, because I always would go for walks in the woods on a rainy day just to open up channels of other parts of me before I would go home and paint. So now why not use that? So, recreating ourselves as artists is a nonstop thing that, if you really are in a divine surrender, you're always having to reinvent yourself anyway, because new beginnings are a requirement. It's called change.
Today's ceremony of union for me is unlike any other. As a reverend, I marry people to people, but this very special time, I am marrying a person to themselves, their purpose. And I have no words to describe what this does for me internally. So I offer this blessing and a prayer that may we all find the truth of who we are as creators, as creative beings. May we access our gifts from God. We all have this within.
Actually, I always and has still said I took a vow between me and God that the assignment that I was on, sent here to create, I would stay in a surrender to and let no man, woman, or child interrupt it. So the vow is with God. And I think even when people get married, they're not getting married per se to each other. They're taking that vow to God as witness that you put us together in this alignment. So to me, you make a promise to each other that you can break, and it's all these other loose ends. But for me, that vow between you and God, when you're being challenged and tested, that's who you're going to reach to for answers and solace and divinity. So to me, it's not a thing I made a vow to. You can't.
So when I took that vow, it was at a time when I was in this quest about religion and spirituality. For me, what I found in the vow is in doing something that is so powerful and profound, you will be challenged. You will be tested. You don't know the kind of friend you are or the kind of commitment you have in you innately till you've been tested and retested. And I've wanted to give up. I have had moments where I didn't think I was reaching people. And I said, well, it's not about the audience. It's about the commitment that I made with the people.
How unfree as humans we've been acting. And it's unraveled. Isn't it ironic that that performance that I did in your space was unraveled? Because I was in a meditation when that word came to me the year before, because I was thinking about the world is unraveling. And look at where we're at. It's revealing all kinds of truths. It's either breaking or bonding people, couples, families, dynamics. It's either breaking or bonding businesses, and it's speaking on a global level. I remembered when that Black Lives Matter really started taking flight during this pandemic, when I started seeing a sit-down resistance in Italy after the whole situation was happening here. And I was like, oh, they're finally seeing us. And I've often, as a woman, as an artist, as a person of color, felt like, and this is the drawing I've not yet created, but it's been in my head and my mouth. I'm naked in a clear plexiglass box that's placed in the middle of a street where people are walking by. They can see me screaming, but they can't hear me. That is the space I live in as a woman of color on this planet. It has never been for me just about this small space of prejudice and racism just here in the areas that I physically move. The world couldn't see me. And now they're starting to see me. Between Me Too and Black Lives Matter and this virus, those three things have unraveled truth in such a profound way. This is a multi-layered pandemic. Globally, people are starting to hear and see what being unfree looks and feels like, because everyone's freedom has been now halted. what artist is creating. And even before you produce the finished result of creating, it's all the thinking that goes on before you finish the tangible part of it. So in this marital bliss that I'm in, I had to say, this is the honeymoon. The whole world stopped for you, honey. You are that special. So I was like, ooh, So now I started, after I did a fast, and then I started doing the cleansing and the juicing, because body and mind go together. You can't separate. So then I had to change my diet so I can hear things at a different level. And the meditation and prayer just was incessant, because it's 2 and 3 times a day. And I was like, all right, I see why other people of other faiths are praying 5 times a day. I see that. I get it. Because this is what happens when your channels are at that frequency. And it wasn't because someone else said it. It was just a divine alignment. When someone died, I had to speak to those transitioners. And then when somebody was going through an illness, and those parts started awakening another creative part to me. So it just shifted my mojo. And then I said, okay, this is also a time to learn.
The feeling I have is always beyond words. There are no words.